Look, I'm a fucking human being. I am a man. I can cry and whoop your ass at the same time.
We're back with episode 69.
Nice.
UFC 305 just happened, so we're going to be covering that. And I feel like every time the UFC goes down under for a card, it's always entertaining. You know what I mean? I think that especially the Australian fighters who are always on those cards, they tend to come in with like a little bit more ferocity, and it always leads to some fun action. And this card was no different. And
yeah, it's interesting for me at least. Because obviously, you know, you've been watching a lot longer, but no American fighters on the card. Like, that's it.
That's wild. I didn't even notice that, actually.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, you're right.
So there, yeah.
Truly a global sport.
Yeah, the Australian cards are usually pretty good, and, you know, they got plenty of Australian fighters. What was it? Before the Dan Hooker fight, you know, there was actually, like, a drought going on from, like, one fight on the prelims to the Dan Hooker Matus Gamrot fight where the Australian fighters weren't getting their hand raised, but I mean, Dan Hooker came through and Kai Kara-France did his thing, and then
King Casey O'Neill.
Yeah.
I think she was the one who was the last person to win before the little drought that you're talking about. I think. Actually, was Jack Jenkins after her? Maybe he was the last one. Actually, I don't remember. Order is like I think might. Never mind, we're wrong, but I'm wrong. But I say we hop into this main card because honestly, there's so much on this one to talk about. I mean, when you start with the main event, you got Dricus du Plessis defending his title versus Israel Adesanya and winning this fight. Oh my god, like a thriller of a fight, and wins it in round 4 via rear naked choke. And honestly, like everything about this fight was just so cool to me. I mean, we had the real bad blood leading up to it, which like made people get more into it. You know, the storyline behind it with the real African champion stuff, and then you know there's so much animosity on fight week. You know, obviously DDP literally made Izzy cry, which is kind of crazy. And then it's like, because remember we were talking about this for Makaev versus Cape. It sucks when there's like bad blood and then the fight is kind of like a stinker. This one, there was bad blood, but it was a really good fight, which made it awesome. And you know, you could start with DDP. He looked really good in there. You know, he had moments on the feet against someone like Izzy, which is kind of tough to do. I think it's just the way that he explodes into range. Like his athleticism, I think, really helps him in his fights. And he's also really smart. Like, he has really good fight IQ. All the takedowns that he shot were so perfectly timed. Like, he's smart enough to know against Izzy, you can't just shoot 900 times because it's going to gas you out, and he's able to get up and defend really well. But it seemed like in this one, the timing on his takedowns really made the difference. And on the ground, that athleticism, like I mentioned, the strength, he's really able to control Izzy down there. And I was really impressed by it, honestly. But what did you think of DDP in this one?
Yeah, well, so honestly, for the fight in general, so for the both of them, like sometimes I'll have a differing opinion on how I view the fight from you and stuff, and I just kind of taking it from not just like moments and whatnot, but as the fight as a whole. But for this fight had really like a little bit of everything for every kind of mixed martial arts fan. Like, for one, you had a title on the line. You had a little bit of you had a finish. You had a little bit of honestly a lot of grappling to go. I mean, that's how the fight ended for one. You had plenty of powerful striking. You had at this point a legend in Israel Adesanya challenging for the title. So, and this is Dricus' first title defense. Like, that's not something to scoff at whatsoever. So you take that, and then, like you said, with all the animosity and bad blood that there already was before the fight even started, this fight had a little bit of everything for every sort of mixed martial arts fan, and it delivered. It's funny because how it started, like, they were clearly chomping at the bit to go at each other and obviously take each other's heads off. And like you said, sometimes when you get these counter fights where there is that bad blood to start, it doesn't actually so I kind of think of Manel Cape and Mohammed Makayev recently. But these two are absolute professionals, and one's already stamped his legacy, and Dricus du Plessis well on his way to stamping his. So how it started, I think, and that's kind of like a tale of this card in a way, because we'll talk about Dan Hooker, Mateusz Gamrot. With Mateusz Gamrot's relentless grappling, then Dan Hooker's power prevailing over that. But here, it seemed like the judges were gonna sway towards Dricus anyways if this fight didn't end in a finish, because Dricus
I think it's proven too. I think Izzy was behind on all the scorecards.
Yeah, so. Dricus was the more powerful striker, I'd have to say. Izzy was landing those light kicks really well, but
jabs
and
too.
He was defending well too. But Dricus, like, it kind of it culminated in those 2 overhand rights for DDP, and he was able to lock in the rear naked choke, and it was honestly it really was.
Did you see the grip adjustment too? Because he was trying to get under the chin and he couldn't, so he switched to the gable grip. Oh my God, brilliant!
Yeah, it was absolute work of art, honestly. This fight really was a lot of fun, and there really wasn't a dull moment. But what I was saying before about how it started, and they were obviously chomping at the bit to go at each other. Like, they had to. It really is like a different mode you have to get in, because they really did have to feel each other out. They were like throwing feints and whatnot at each other, and then that's when the action really got going. But
I liked Izzy's style in this fight. He looked a lot different in the way that he was attacking and moving forward at times. And he was doing really well. Like, we don't usually see Izzy be that aggressive in the cage.
I think it's now at the point, and you saw it. In a way, you saw it when he fought Sean Strickland. It's at this point he's not getting any younger. And a guy like DDP, who is where he is now, he does carry that more explosiveness. He's younger, and at this point maybe even more athletic, and there's a lot of martial artists probably don't want to admit it, but that's the base you want for a fighter, pretty much. A mixed martial artist, and also you just gotta go in there you obviously have to feel like you're the best. You don't give a fuck what anyone else thinks, and
he's very well rounded. People mess around with the clips of him and shit. You ever see because he does lunge forward and stuff when he punches, but when he lands, he's usually hurting people. And that's hard to defend against. Izzy was doing well, hitting him with some jabs and uppercuts coming in, but it didn't really seem like it was stinging him. And even if you could say, well, maybe Izzy just didn't have that type of power that he could get him, or maybe Dricus is just that tough. This fight was awesome.
And Izzy had the crowd backing him as well. And before the fight, obviously DDP was reigning in the boos, and that didn't faze him whatsoever. He completely embraced it, and it's fitting that he got a submission victory, because the crowd was not rocking with the grappling on this card. But
that was just a badass submission.
There's literally exactly. He dropped him and just did what he had to do to retain the belt.
It was a great fight. I think that this one's going to age really well, personally. I think as more time goes on, if DDP can keep the title for a while, especially, people are going to see this fight as a passing of the torch in some ways. But, we won't know until we know, I guess. But in terms of after the fight, I also loved just how classy they both were. Both DDP in victory and Adesanya in defeat. I thought that, considering that they genuinely don't like each other, and that's not changed personally, but they still have that respect because they just went in there and had a battle. It went almost all 4 rounds, or almost 5 rounds, and I think that was really cool to see. And even the stuff backstage where DDP gave him the jacket to kind of remember we just 2 Africans just headlined this card. That's
well, let me ask you what you thought the scorecard was going into the 4th round.
It's tough.
Honestly.
Yeah,
I wouldn't. 2018 DDP is not as far-fetched as one might think.
I mean, You would definitely have to give DDP the second, obviously. And then he won in the fourth, so you're not even bothering scoring that round. It's just tough because it's, again, like the differing between like volume and like the actual damage, because Izzy was landing a lot of shots, but they just weren't doing much, except the ones to the body. It seemed like the body shots were having a little bit of an effect, but DDP's just a gamer, dude. He's got grit.
Which is crazy because Izzy's always been the one to, he's always been the one to be that technician and land wherever he needs to land, but he would put the power behind it too. Now it's at the point where, I don't want to say, but I did mention before that he obviously is not getting any younger, so
35.
That power could just...
I don't know if that goes, though. I mean, isn't that the phrase, 2 power is the last thing that leaves? I mean, DDP, I think he's just tough. I mean, he got hit pretty hard by Darren Till, I remember, when they fought, and he got through it and won. I think that this dude just has a really good chin.
Yeah, and we all saw after his fight with Sean Strickland, and then just off that alone, people were like, "Oh, look how DDP looks compared to Sean Strickland." Yet the judges are gonna score it for DDP, and it's just like, it's not how that really works. But DDP, it's just you gotta carry that fight. Yeah, you gotta have that toughness, and that's what gets you a belt around your waist at some point. So,
well, his next fight is probably going to be against another former champion, someone who he's already beaten, as you just mentioned. Sean Strickland is the shoo-in.
It could be against 2 former champions if you factor in Robert Whittaker.
Oh, that's not going to happen.
You don't think that?
No, I don't think there's any chance.
I don't know.
That fight was a breeze. I have no interest in seeing that.
I think DDP
and plus Dana confirmed it. Like, he already said it.
Okay.
He's said it multiple times that he deserves a rematch, and like he did beat Paulo Costa too. It's not like he's just sat
it makes sense. I said this after I alluded to this after Robert Whittaker's last fight, because obviously he's facing a guy on short notice who's
Ikram
Aliskerov, who just stepped into the rankings, or is he still not ranked?
I don't know. He might have been barely in the rankings, but I remember and you talked about he's a lot better than people realize, because he's not a big name, but this dude's really good, and Whittaker just starched him.
Obviously a win over Hamza would have done more, but obviously that's not Robert Whittaker's fault. So it's what makes sense. And
I think Strickland having a win too in between definitely doesn't help Rob's case.
And Sean Strickland's playing that leverage game, just like sitting back, is because he earned it. The fans know, and And
the fight was close, man. I still think he had that one. I'm not like one of those people who, if I see an outcome of a close fight and I don't agree with, it's not necessarily a robbery, but I remember I scored that fight for Strickland back then, but I understood why you could score it for DDP too. It was a close fight. That's why I want to see it.
Yeah, well, if you want to touch more on the rematch between DDP and Sean Strickland, then
I mean, I think it's almost definite. I don't see why Dana would go back on his word for that one. It doesn't just make much sense. I think Whittaker could fight for the title either way, because if Strickland wins, boom, you have a new fight right there. But even if DDP beats Strickland, Whittaker either has time to get another win, or if he does want to sit there and just wait, he can probably get one anyway.
That's what I feel is the thing about the middleweight division, and not that it's top heavy like I called light heavyweight, but it is kind of like in a way a revolving door with the top guys. They kind of just fight each other.
I agree with you that it's definitely in a way top heavy, but I think this is why it's different than light heavyweight. At middleweight, all these guys at the top who are getting older, they're still beating these younger up and coming fighters. So the gatekeepers aren't losing. So that's why we have these same guys really up at the top. And it really hasn't changed much. I think, because Cannonier is still right up there. I mean, he's fighting next weekend too against a young and up and coming guy. So maybe something will happen there that'll change the landscape a bit. But I think that's what it is. Because I remember when we talked about light heavyweight at one point, we were saying how it's because there's a clear difference between like the top 6 to 7 and then the rest of the top 15. At middleweight, I definitely think that these guys in the lower part of the rankings are good. I just think the people on the upper echelon are like just they're all-time greats for the most part. A lot of them are former. Izzy's a former champion. Strickland's a former champion. Whitaker's a former champion. Like, it's not like these guys are just top contenders who've never done anything. These guys have been there, done that, and I think that helps them.
I think so. Yeah, we could stay on the topic of Sean Strickland and the DDP rematch because it's really interesting because if it goes one of two ways. So if DDP wins, then let's talk about if Strickland wins first.
I think if Strickland wins, Whitaker could get a title shot right now. I do think that it's possible. Mm-hmm. He's earned it just with his career.
And Sean Strickland definitely is the kind of guy that would definitely want to clear out the entire, make sure like he leaves no stone unturned in the division that he's pretty much given like just about everyone a shot, and that or either that or he's already fought the guys on his way to get a title shot and they probably don't really deserve a shot anyways. But with DDP wins, why this one's probably easier to talk about because he's kind of already got like, and not that it was on his own doing that he said this, because Poatan himself was the one who posted that picture with DDP in the background. He's like, I'll just drop to 185 and just
I agree with DDP on that one though. He should just go up and fight him at 205. Why give Alex an excuse?
Jargus is really like smart when it comes to getting fights, to be honest.
He's good with the media. I feel like people don't talk about that enough. Yeah. Like, he's very well spoken, and even in the press conferences, honestly, he's very witty.
Definitely after last night, like, I think this guy is really starting to form a case as to who the most well-rounded middleweight is. I think middleweight, like for a while, obviously you had Izzy, who was, like I just said, who was able to have that technique. He was able to defend takedowns, and he still is, obviously. But
even Pereira,
yeah.
I think Whitaker would probably have been the last one that was truly like.
But you wouldn't really see submissions like that.
No,
you're right at all. And so for DDP to get my bad, hit the overhand rights first. So put the power first on the feet, and then lock in, like you just said, how we switched the grip and all that to get the tap. This guy is seriously the real deal.
I did want to say this, by the way, because people are gonna shit on us in the comments if we don't. Whitaker, he does have a fight with Hamzat on UFC 308. I thought about it midway through. I was like, I think they confirmed that, and I looked on Tapology. They did.
UFC. Where is that happening?
I think is that Abu Dhabi? Yeah, because that's October, so it should be. I'm gonna double check though, but yeah, it's in October 26th. That's when it's gonna happen. Nice. And yes, Etihad Arena.
Nice.
It'll be the co-main too.
That already sounds like it's gonna be really good.
Oh, it's gonna be 5 rounds too. Oh, that's amazing. That's actually really smart.
Yeah, dude. So
if he wins that fight, I think he'll get it. I think he'll get the winner of DDP Strickland. I think that's probably how it's gonna end up happening.
Yeah, I have no worries about whether or not Robert Whitaker can go 5 rounds. It's just, hopefully Hamzat doesn't kill himself in training again, and then once you get to the fight itself, that if it does go all 5, that he's not completely gassed. So
yeah, his cardio is a big question, and I think Whitaker could beat him. It's definitely an interesting matchup, but I think that'll make middleweight a lot more interesting in a little bit. I mean, we talked about that upper echelon. If Whitaker loses to Hamzat, that throws the whole division out of whack. So that could be like a title eliminator in some ways, but 185, man, it's been such an interesting ride over the past couple of years, hasn't it? And this fight was another great chapter of it, and I think that DDP Strickland, I think that'll be a fun rematch, and that'll be an interesting chapter to add in the future. But let's talk about an Aussie who won on this card in the co-main event. Kai Kara France starches Steve Erceg. And, there's not as much to talk about in the fight, we know Kai Kara France has insane power for a flyweight. I think DC said he has 13 knockouts, and I don't know if it's in total or just the UFC, but that's nuts, dude, for a guy that small. Those left overhands, man.
I know. Jeez. I know. I for one, and probably many other people, because anyways, I think the fight, the closing odds for this fight had Steve Erceg as a relatively comfortable favorite. Anyways, it makes sense. The guy coming off a very valiant title opportunity, and Kai Kara France has been out for a year with the concussion, something like that. It's been a while.
When did he fight Albazi? I don't remember when exactly that was, but
kind of what I was saying after Davison Figueiredo's last fight, when he was a flyweight, and how he was able to separate himself from others, was thanks a lot in part to how powerful of a striker he is. And so Kai Kara France is he continues to put on these remarkable finishes, just super exciting, explosive, and that's really what you want out of a UFC flyweight. And
he's so exciting.
Yeah,
I think that helps him a lot, and I think that gives him better odds at getting another title shot. His title shot was an interim title shot, if I remember right, wasn't it? Against Moreno, I think.
I believe so.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I could. Well, here I'm on his page. I might as well look.
And it's so interesting because, obviously heavyweight is the biggest weight class, and flyweight is the smallest weight class. But for both of them, it's the best fighters really do know how to just get the fast finish. Fast and exciting finish. And so I look at Kai Kara France, and I'm just reassured after a fight like this that he can very well fight for the title and win the title. And obviously, even if it's not a fast finish that he would get on a Pantoja, still think he would be able to hang throughout the entire fight, do a lot of damage, and then we'll just have to see who gets to win there. But
I have an interesting comparison that I thought of based off what you just said. Kai Kara France at flyweight kind of reminds me of what Rumble Johnson was, the late great Rumble Johnson, at light heavyweight. One of those guys, he might not be the best wrestler in the world, he might not be the most technically sound, but when he hits you,
yeah, dude,
good luck. And that's what Kai is at flyweight, which is it's funny to think about because Rumble is this big guy, and then Kai Kara France is obviously a flyweight. But in a way, that's kind of what he reminds me of, because he may not be the best all around, but if he touches you, man, he could put you out, and that could be in a title fight. And that's the intrigue with him.
That's the kind of parallel I was definitely trying to make.
It's funny to think of Rumble and Kai Kara France. That's why I'm laughing. But stylistically, guys,
Yeah, you get it. So like I was saying, the closing odds and whatnot, sure, they might have had Steve Erceg as a comfortable favorite, but I know I, for one, and probably a lot of other people we're more or less sleeping on Kai Kara France, just trying to still feel out if he could still bring that big fight on the feet like he's always been able to do, and just get an exciting finish. So there it is, and it's really cool. So I do hope we get that title shot someday.
Yeah, you think he'll be able to get that next? Flyweight's in a weird position right now. Because who could Pantoja fight? Yeah. Especially now that they cut Makayev. I mean, Amir Albazi is the highest ranked coming off of a good win, and that was over Kai Kara France. But and you were right, by the way, that was over a year ago. I don't know why. It felt like it was more recent. But I think that was his last win. So there's no momentum for Amir Albazi right now, but there is momentum for Kai Kara France. And maybe if they think that Kai won that fight, he could slip in there, because I don't know. I just don't know who they could give Pantoja. Pantoja's in such a weird position because he had to work so hard for the title shot that he kind of cleared out the division before he even became champion in a way.
I'd like to think that Kai Kara France is over with the fans too, because they just did it again, because he gets these exciting finishes, and because he hits so hard. So, I don't know how much that would play a factor into whether or not he would get a title shot next, but
Oh, I think it would help a lot.
yeah, I know I wouldn't be opposed to it. I know a lot of fans wouldn't be opposed to it. So
yeah, I hope it happens. That would be cool to see him versus Pantoja. Maybe we'll see it. I want to say they fought like a long time ago. Maybe not though. No, yeah, he did. The Ultimate Fighter, season 24, 2016, and he lost via unanimous decision. Long time ago though, almost a decade at this point. So I'd be down to see that, and especially since that's an amateur loss too. Technically, it's not on his professional record.
Makes sense. Yeah,
I would love to see that, and for UFC title, that'd be cool. That'd be good for Tough because then they could use that to kind of build it, But speaking of Tough in the real sense of the word, Dan Hooker, man, against Mateusz Gamrot, that was such a fun fight and back and forth, split decision. Dan Hooker edges out Mateusz Gamrot 29-28, 29-28, and then Mateusz Gamrot got a scorecard for his own 29-28, and I thought it was fair because the grappling he had in this fight was pretty well, but it was pretty. How can I put this? I mean, I personally think, and I think everybody should think this because it's in the rules.
It's what kept him in the fight because otherwise Dan Hooker probably could have been able to finish it.
Yeah.
With how hard he was.
I mean, even Dan Hooker, though, he was pretty beat up after that first round.
Yeah,
like, both of these guys really took a beating, which is kind of crazy. But
like you said, the toughness. Is
for both guys.
Prevails.
I started it with Dan Hooker because he won, but, like, you're right. Gamrot, honestly, he took a little bit of damage, too, and more than a little bit. I mean, this was just a really good fight. It came down to how you scored the first round between these two because it seemed like Gamrot kind of did enough to win round 2, and Hooker clearly won round 3. So when you go to the first round, you could look at the grappling on Gamrot's side and maybe say that should have played more of a factor in the judges' scorecards. But I personally think that the right guy won because I think Dan Hooker did more damage. I know that Gamrot was landing some big shots on Dan when they were on the ground, but in my opinion, it's a bigger deal when there's a knockdown, and Dan Hooker almost knocked Mateusz Gamrot out at the end of that round. Yeah. And because of that, I think the first 4.5 minutes are not null and void, but that knockdown really erased all that good work, in my opinion, because that was the defining moment of the round. He almost finished the fight there, and because of that, I think you have to give him the round if damage should matter more, like the rules say. That's how I view it, but I don't know. What did you think of the outcome of this fight and I guess that first round? I mean, I don't know if you have the same opinion because this was a close fight throughout, honestly.
Well, going in, I think, a good bet, honestly, along the lines of Mateusz Gamrot over 4.5 takedowns. I think would have been obvious, and obviously it would have hit anyways. But just going in, I felt like you knew that Mateusz Gamrot was gonna look to just really overwhelm Dan Hooker with takedowns and whatnot and wrestling. And so he tried and did a very good job of it, but I think Dan Hooker's already a guy who carries a good base to him, and he's able to hold his own up against the fence and all that, and he just already with Dan Hooker you get I don't want to say wild striking, but he does put a lot together, and it does add up at the end of the fight. Like you just mentioned before how Mateusz Gamrot almost got knocked out at the end there too. So I'm in agreement in the sense that the damage should always prevail in the end.
Because Gamrot
because grappling is good. Grappling anyways is just a lot more of a nuanced thing. So and then so at least when it comes to the judges, right? The judges sometimes can, and then we could even talk about in the next fight with obviously the scorecard.
We'll get to that.
Judges could tend to just obviously just see things differently, even though we as fans might know exactly what the fighter in question is trying to do. But in this case, like, and what's in the rules anyways is how damage prevails. So the
and
judges,
like I get Dan Hooker was bloody, but
honestly, like, this kind of, in a way, I kind of get reminded of what I was talking about when I was talking to Sam Alvey, and I asked him like how judges even really quantify damage. And he was, it's like, well, are they just looking at how a guy looks at the end of the fight? And there wasn't even like really like any real answer to it. It was just that. Yeah, like there's the significant strike stat, and that's that. Like, and even the significant strike stat.
It's a weird stat.
Exactly.
Because like, how do you constitute a significant strike? Like, because it seems like even like a little jab is a significant strike. So I mean, how do you? You're right. How do you quantify that? And like, even I was watching some of the Joe Rogan like fight companion that he did for this one. And he said the exact same thing. Actually, he's like, well, "What is a significant strike? Like, how do they even calculate it?" So.
Exactly.
It doesn't make, and with the grappling, you're right too. It's very nuanced because people can view different types of grappling more effective than others. Because I think we've even had this conversation before. Like, some people will favor someone who's on top, even if they're defending against submission attempts the whole time, because they value wrestling and top control. Or some people think if you're attacking with submissions from the bottom and you're making it impossible for the guy on top to do something, then they're gonna go with the jiu-jitsu guy. So like, you're right. I don't know if there's a way to improve it though. I just, cause how? I mean, you never, unless you somehow do like a computerized judge, which I'd never really want to say, honestly. I mean, to me, that's like putting the robot umps in baseball. Like, I don't want to see that. But like, I think that the human aspect of it definitely is interesting. In some ways, though, it can be bad if the wrong guy wins or gets a 30-27 scorecard.
Exactly.
As we'll talk about.
At the end of the day, every single fighter that steps in, and this doesn't just go for UFC or even professionals, but every single fighter, I feel like, at least should be looking to finish the fight, and that's what matters at the end of the day. You don't leave it to the scorecards, because at that point, obviously, you're leaving it in someone else's hands. Like, you're the one that put in all this work during training camp to get the opportunity and step in there with the guy. Like, you want to be the one that doesn't leave any crumbs on the plate, and nothing that people are gonna stir up any controversy over, and that fans obviously are gonna gravitate towards and ride with you with, because you just put another man out cold. So
you sound like Dana White right now. We love guys who finish fights. They don't want to see you wrestling for 15 minutes, holding the guy up against the cage. We love guys who finish.
We love guys. Yes, sir. We love guys who finish fights. So.
I love when Dana gets amped about that, like especially when Makayev had that fight and he's getting. Oh my god. Yeah. I love it.
Shout out to Dana there.
Yeah. This kid who's like 38 years old, like, I love when he does that. He'll call like guys who are 40 kid. I mean, it's hilarious. But I mean, yeah. Back to this fight though, to like kind of round out the conversation before we move on to this next one, because I think it's a similar type of thing that we'll be talking about. But I was impressed, man. I thought Dan Hooker looked really good in this fight, even when he was getting taken down. I think that his grappling defense, whether it be against the fence like you said, or even just the way he's able to get back to his feet on the ground, I think he's massively underrated in his grappling, because they see the loss to Makhachev, which was obviously a dominant loss. He got Kimura quickly, but you don't factor in the opponent. Like, Islam Makhachev is the champion for one, but also he's one of the best grapplers in the sport. So I don't really hold that loss against Dan as much as other people do, because when you look at his other fights where he's had to grapple and defend on the ground, he's very crafty. I like what he does sometimes. He'll attack with the guillotine and force the guy to create space to try and get out of that, and then he's good at pushing right back up to his feet, unless he has the guillotine where he'll just try and finish it. I just thought that his grappling defense was impressive in this fight, and I think it's honestly part of why he won, because if he wasn't able to get up in the way that he was and he was on the ground longer, who knows how this fight would have been scored. But
yeah, so Dan Hooker looked great as a fighter, and Dan Hooker looked totally different as a person. I mean, can we talk about his
tattoos?
Yeah, can we talk about the transformation real quick? The tattoos, not only the tattoos, but if you take the photo from his last fight where he was doing like the model, obviously in his trunks and stuff.
Yeah.
His even like, bro, he just looked more ripped. He's got the blonde hair.
Yeah.
I mean, this man Dan Hooker plays. Yeah, I think Dan Hooker's always been like a fascinating, like polarizing guy, but. Dude, like, I was seeing nothing. Like, I would go on Twitter, and the first thing I would see every time would be the side-by-side and his
He has, like, 20 more tattoos every fight. Like, he's
crazy.
Inked up. It's crazy. I mean, people who have just started watching the UFC, they would have no idea.
Dude, that's what I'm saying, bro. Yeah, dog, he loves this shit. He said it himself. I don't know if you saw the clip.
I mean, he's
sitting
one of
in
my
the corner.
favorite fighters, man. I'll never forget his fight versus Poirier in the Apex. That Apex card. Oh my God! Like, I'm so glad that fight was in the UFC Apex, and that might be one of the only fights I feel that way about, because just every punch. Ugh.
I would watch this guy fight anybody, man.
I'd watch him fight in a parking lot. It'd probably be a good fight too.
Yeah, dude, and it seems like obviously he's got that fire and that spark back clearly. So
and now he's right back in the top 5 because Gamrot was ranked number 5. So you'd imagine he's gonna slide right in there. And this is a selfish fight pick that I kind of want to see. And I know the UFC doesn't typically like to put a guy coming off a loss up against a guy coming off a win, but Justin Gaethje versus Dan Hooker is a fight I need for my soul.
Just make it happen.
Yes.
Just do it.
Like, we don't overcomplicate it with the rankings, the situations, who's coming off what. That's a banger of a fight, and we need to see it. So, and especially, imagine if Dan Hooker gets a win there. Oh my God, that'd be huge.
I could honestly, my God, I could see. It's funny with this case because it does involve Justin Gaethje, but I could see another just calling of the center between the two, and they just absolutely throw haymakers at each other until someone drops. So obviously, like Max Holloway versus Justin Gaethje, but that would honestly be freaking amazing. So
yeah, I mean they have not fought. I did want to confirm that. I was pretty sure that they hadn't. But I just think that would be smart for the division, because even if Gaethje wins, people like Dan Hooker, so there's gonna be a lot of momentum. And Gaethje's one of those guys. Like you said, Uncle Dana, he finishes fights. He never goes to the scorecards. Because Gaethje is another one of those guys. If he wins a fight, he's always in the hunt for the title because the fans love him, the UFC loves him, and Dan Hooker, I think, honestly, people feel similarly about, in a sense, because his fights are almost always super exciting. And I think everyone was happy to see Dan Hooker get that win. So
yeah.
Let's talk about that scorecard that we've mentioned a couple times in the fight talk for this one. So, for those who didn't see it, Jairzinho Rozenstruik defeated Tai Tuivasa by split decision, but had to be one of the most bizarre split decisions I've ever seen, because one of those scorecards, as we'll get to right now, Rozenstruik had 2 of the judges score it for him, 130-27 and then a 29-28. And then Howie Booth scored the fight 30-27 for Tuivasa. And that was such an egregious scorecard that they relieved him of his duties right after the fight, which is nuts. So I guess there's not as much to talk about for the fight. I mean, we will talk about it, but the scorecard.
Before you go on, not only did they relieve him of his duties right after, but then, at least from what I heard, because I know the name, but I wasn't obviously sure of his track record and whatnot. But
they had him killed in the parking lot. They actually had him assassinated. Oh,
they had
him killed. They've never done that before.
That's it. You'll never see him again.
I'm actually very intrigued about what you're gonna say. I just had to say that.
He got replaced by an actual good legendary judge. His name is Ben Cartilage, I believe.
Yeah, I know who that is.
And then they were that's how you know there's no, we're not playing around no more. We gave you the chance, Howie, and now we're taking you out to the parking lot.
Yeah, taking you out to the parking lot and having you killed. No. I'm sure Howie Booth is a good guy, but that was a rough scorecard. I just don't know how you could have gave a 27 to Tuivasa.
Rough scorecard and a rough fight.
Yeah, very disappointing. I think the UFC thought that there was going to be a knockout in this one, but I think I said this to you earlier.
Well, I mean, what I'm just glad about is that obviously it's not a main event, so it's not going to be 5 rounds between heavyweights. So there's that. But I mean, yeah, like it is what it is, and so you can touch more on this, but
because I think this is why the fight was like that, because Ty, when he is at his best, he's just explosive and he's just coming at dudes like crazy, and he makes it an ugly dog fight. But in this one, I think probably it's because Jairzinho does have like crazy knockout power himself, and Ty also hasn't been doing as good as of late, and maybe he just wanted to try something different. But to try and outpoint a guy like Jairzinho Rozenstruik, who is his specialty is point fighting pretty much, I just thought that was a bizarre game plan by Ty, and I think he seemed very tentative in there, and I think that's ultimately why this fight wasn't that exciting, because you have to expect Rozenstruik to kind of pick him apart from the outside, and he doesn't always have the most thrilling victories unless it's by like a crazy knockout. But I thought Tuivasa going in there and trying to outpoint him was a bit bizarre, honestly.
Yeah, so I think you just did say as well. I mean, Tai Tuivasa has been on this skid, and so probably just is something that he wanted to switch up. And yeah, I mean, I guess he felt like he didn't have much any other choice than to try to point fight. But obviously, Biggie Boy's not the guy you want to try to do that with. So at the end of it all, really, what I kind of gathered is that here's the good thing, because Tai Tuivasa is a fan favorite, obviously, and he's a great guy anyways, and he's super exciting. So what I gathered is that I think he's still able to hang with these top heavyweights, which is good. So hopefully there are still more fights. It's just that it's just like kind of over the course of the long term, it's like the more. Not even
like
that.
What's his motivation? You mean, or is that not where you're going?
Not really. It's more like over the course of the long term. If he not only if he's losing these fights, but it's like if these fights stack up and it's like, okay, well, his career is just only getting longer and longer. It's like, well, at what point would we see him ever like fight for a title? Pretty much.
I love Tai Tuivasa, but he's very one-dimensional in terms of his fight style, and to me, I think it's hard to be like that and be a champion. But to his credit, at heavyweight, that would be the division where it could happen. And Ty is one of those dudes, kind of like Kai Kara France in a sense. When he's in there and he can touch a guy, he usually puts him out. I don't think that it's very likely that he would get to a title shot, especially off this skid that he's had. But I don't know. I never like counting someone out, and there's a lot of reasons for that. I mean, we've seen it many times over the years, like whether it be a guy like Michael Bisping or Charles Oliveira or Glover Teixeira, like where everybody kind of counted them out, but then they finally just figured it out and put it together and got that title run. I think he's someone who's very capable of that. But we need to see it. And, obviously this fight was really just a bad showing from him. And I'm curious to see where he goes from here, because I hope he can get back in the win column. Because like you said, he's a fan favorite. It's so much more fun when he's winning and saying funny stuff in the fight, post-fight interviews, taking the shoeies. I think he's good for the sport. So hopefully he can turn it around. But let's talk about another guy with an interesting post-fight celebration. How do you say his name again? Carlos
Prates.
Prates. Okay, yeah, I butchered it before the pod, just so you guys know. So I was like, let me let Tiz say this one so I don't mess it up.
Just a straight Brazilian assassin.
From the awesome fight team, Fighting Nerds, who have quite a few guys making the run. Nerds. Yeah. I'm not blind. I don't wear glasses. I can't relate. I can see. I'm like this guy.
Yeah, I'm not a fighting nerd. I'm just blind. So.
I'm not a fighting nerd. I'm just blind. That's crazy. That's a crazy quote. But anyway, talking about Prates. He spoiled the Leech's UFC return, Li Jingliang. And by the way, very happy to see the Leech back in the cage. I know he had like that spinal injury. That was really sad when that happened because he was out for a while. But this fight was not a good return for him because they put him. To be fair, they put him up against quite the up and comer in Carlos Prates, and his kickboxing is just absolutely incredible. And he's had 4 UFC fights so far. If you want to count the fight in the Contender Series, he's won them all by knockout. He's on a 10-fight winning streak right now in MMA, but it's technically a 12-fight winning streak because he had 2 kickboxing fights in between that he also won. I mean, his striking is just so dangerous, and I think he's super fun to watch. He has wins over good opponents. I mean, beating the Leech like that, I know it's been a while for him, but you remember him. I mean, he's a really good fighter, very well-rounded too. So I think that this dude should be fighting a ranked opponent next. And I think if he gets a win, Mike Bone needs to give him a whole pack of cigarettes instead of just 2. I thought that was great. Can we talk about that real quick? Him ripping darts after the fight.
Yeah.
Oh my God! Because he did that, I think, for his last fight, and then in the post-fight presser, he pulls out the empty pack. He's like, I can't find cigarettes anywhere, and Mike Bone hooked him up apparently. So. That's an interesting one. I think that's going to give him a bunch of fans. I mean, it's made me into a bigger fan.
Easily.
But in terms of his fighting, man, he's just absolutely incredible, isn't he?
Yeah. So, I thought in the beginning, this fight honestly had fight of the night potential written all over it. I thought Lee was honestly. It seemed like Carlos Prates was already overwhelming Lee with the power, but Lee was obviously I wasn't totally fazed by it. He was feeling it, but he was able to still defend and still get in some offense of his own. But when you got to the finish, where it just got to a point where Prates' power just became so overwhelming that Lee wasn't even defend. And not that he wasn't trying to defend himself. It was just that he probably just felt so, already just tired and compromised anyways that, he couldn't even defend himself. Like his hands were down, and Carlos Prates was seemingly just, I think more, not really as much trying to put the combos together, but more just looking for that opening to land that knockout punch.
Landed a few of them in this fight in that last
so it seems like, and then Lee got his hands back up. It seemed like Lee remembered I have to defend myself, but man, just Carlos Prates, dog, like I just said, he's an assassin, and not only does he put these punches on the mark, but he's got hella power behind it too. So
quick too. The speed that he throws with his hand speed is just nuts.
This is a guy that a lot of people can get behind. Obviously, UFC brass can get behind, and
I'm hoping they do. I want this guy to become a star.
So,
He's funny, man. I like this dude a lot. And we talked about the fighting nerds in the very beginning.
Yeah, shout out to them.
Yeah, we got to give them credit because they have a guy like Carlos Prates, but they also have John Silva, who we've talked a lot about lately because he's had an impressive run. Next week, Kyle Bolhayo. He's fighting in the main event. He's had a good run so far in the UFC, and now he's going to be fighting Jared Cannonier, and he could break into that upper echelon at middleweight that we just talked about being so hard to break into. And I think if he does that next week, oh man, wow. I think that team is truly one of the best rising gyms in the sport right now, and this guy, Carlos Prates, he's just another example of that. And they're very marketable. They're all funny, in their own way. And I think that's going to help them in the future. I'm excited to see more people who come out of this gym because I'm sure we're going to, especially with the success of these 3 guys so far, and probably even more that me and you just aren't familiar about. Just maybe we don't know that they train there.
Maybe just at least this is what it should be when it comes to these up and coming teams and gyms. Just have a way, know how to market yourself and get over with the fans, and then obviously when you step in there in the cage, then you can really just fight free and not to say that there are fighters that do this, but there are fighters that could feel they have to get these crazy finishes and whatnot. They have to maybe step out of their comfort zone and what they're comfortable and training in and stuff, and just like a fighting style that they have to embrace just so that fans can gravitate towards them and so that they can get those bigger fights and all that. But
that's actually why Ben Askren threw the spinning back fist against Damian Maia. He was like, I got to get some striking in there. The fans, they love to see striking. I know I'm a big wrestler, but I'm just going to throw a spinning back fist that had a better chance of hitting you in America than it hit Damian Maia in Singapore where they were. That's still like one of the... I love Ben Askren. I love Ben Askren. Literally one of my favorite welterweights of that era. And I also give him credit for making that division interesting because before he went there, it was kind of getting dull. And Ben went in there and started talking shit to everybody. But man, that striking was quite awful. And Carlos Prates' striking is the exact opposite. Very good. So I'm intrigued to see this guy continue and see who else comes out of that gym in the future. And I thought that was a fun way to start off that main card. But to get to one or two prelims, Walter Walker, brother of Johnny Walker, fights Junior Tafa, brother of Justin Tafa. So I thought that was interesting.
That is interesting.
In this one, Tafa's striking every time he fights. He looks so good, but his grappling is just not good at all when he's on his back. He's not good at getting up. So he just kind of tries to hold guys until maybe the ref can separate them because there's no action. And that almost did happen at one point. You mentioned the boos for some of these fighters earlier. Walter Walker was getting booed big time when he was just laying there. But then the big storyline in this fight is the end of it. And here's my thoughts on this. And I want to say that these may be my thoughts, but what I'm going to say is a fact. So people just got to stop complaining about the scream being the reason why the fight ended. That's a verbal tap. That's in the rules. You can go find it. It is there. So they consider that a verbal tap, and that is a valid reason to stop the fight. So people saying that Junior Tafa got screwed at the end there, no, he didn't. So it's in the rules. He lost fair and square. And I didn't love that he went up to Walter after and he slapped him. Like, that's... Why are you mad at him? That's not his fault. You're just kind of frustrated because he held you down the whole round, and then the ref you think messed up, which he didn't. And then to do that afterwards, I don't think that helps him, especially now because I think he's either 1-3 or 1-4 in the UFC, and which isn't a reflection on how good he is because if you look at the people that he's lost to, they're all good. So I think that he has potential and deserves like a chance to continue in the UFC, but I think that doing something like that after the fight, that's a tough look. I mean, when Paul Daly punched Josh Koscheck after they fought, I know that's very different. It's a little slap versus an actual punch. Dana White vowed that Paul Daly would never fight in the UFC again, and he held firm on that. And you wonder if something like that is going to have to happen here because you just can't do that. This is the highest level. But great heel hook. I just think that the people complaining about the finish are misguided. I don't know what you thought of it. I mean, I just feel like if it's the rules, you can't argue it. You could say that the rule is stupid. I have no problem with that. But that's what it is. So.
Well, you know what it is probably more people that, they go like heavy on these bets. So in this case, with Junior Tafa, there's a lot of units being lost there, and so they just have nothing else to latch on, and it's like, well, he didn't actually tap, so well, that's robbery. Like what he yelled and was like, just not really familiar with the rules and stuff because I mean.
Like it was a fair loss. That's my point. Like I wanted to say, like, what do you think? But there's no, in my opinion, there's no debate. Like, because that's the rule. You could debate about the rule all you want, but you can't debate whether the ref did the right thing because he did. That was the rule, and he lived by it. Like he enforced it. That's what he's supposed to do. It's what he's there for.
Because what if it was something like the other way around, where if Tafa is screaming and the fight the fight doesn't get stopped.
Yeah, and then you're mad at the
And
ref
now-
because you just let the guy's knee get ripped apart.
Exactly.
I mean, that's a dangerous submission. Yeah, you're right. It's not like you just had him in like a rear naked choke, which is also dangerous, but at least you're going to walk out with your limbs intact. I don't know. I didn't think Tafa handled it that well afterwards with what he did, and I just think that the fans' perspectives on it have been interesting, to say the least, because like I said, there's not a debate. There's no debate to be had here. And I think it's a good rule, personally. I think if you're screaming, the fight should probably get stopped. I don't know what you think, but I think that's a fair one. I get why he'd be mad, but still.
But like, the thing about him getting mad is it more a natural thing? Like this is just how he's reacting after like what just happened. Like he's still got this adrenaline and stuff, and it's like, oh well, you can't, your fight's over, so you can't fight anymore. Or is it just something for show that he's got the crowd behind him, obviously, and
I honestly thought it was more frustration because like just getting held down the whole round like that, it's just demoralizing. And then you feel you shouldn't have gotten finished because you didn't tap.
That's just something you gotta go back into the lab and work on,
Yeah, I mean he's such a good striker. Like every fight starts on the feet, so he has an opportunity to finish them, but he cannot keep getting taken down. He has to work on getting up or defending them, because right now his grappling. What did Habib say to Conor? Your grappling is zero, nothing. Like so, I think that's really where it's at with him, and I wonder if he's gonna still be in the UFC after this, because like I said, I don't know like what his contract situation is, but his record so far in the UFC hasn't been that good. But I do think he has real potential, so I hope that they maybe keep him around, but I don't know if that's like a stupid hope to have. But anyway, the last thing I really wanted to talk about on this card, not even really as much about the fight, but King Casey O'Neill, I wanted to shout her out. For one, she is a really good up-and-coming fighter herself. I think she's 10-2 now with this win. I think she's one of the better up-and-coming flyweights right now, especially with her ground game. But after the fight, she did the Olympic breakdancing celebration, and she said this, and I don't disagree with her. I think that she actually did a better job at that dance than the dancer did in the Olympics. Because, like, that, I don't know how she got in. Like, have you ever watched, like, any breakdancing videos in your time? Like, no, but, like, I don't mean, like, are you secretly this massive fan of it? Like, have you ever seen, like, any videos of a real good breakdancer? They don't look like that. Like, that athlete, if we can call her that, she was a very bad representation of a breakdancer. And I think that people seeing her doing that and thinking, like, that's what breakdancing is, no, it's not.
It's what Casey O'Neill did.
Yeah, well, that was more breakdancing than whatever that lady was doing. What was her name? Ray Gun?
Yeah.
It wasn't even, yeah. Isn't it funny when you think about the Olympics, how, like, there's, like, sports like basketball, wrestling, I don't know, fencing, swimming, and then you got breakdancing. like the fact that, like, I don't know, like, who's LeBron James, for example, this super athlete, star of the USA basketball team, and then you got Ray Gun. They're both Olympians. They both made it there. Yeah. That's on the record. You know what I mean? Because breakdancers, you have to be an athlete to be a good breakdancer. But, like, I don't know what they were thinking sending her there. Yeah, there has to be somebody better. That can't be. Well, where is she from? Was she from Australia? I think she might have been from Australia.
Oh wow, the irony there.
Let me see. Now I need to know, because if that's the case, what country is she from? But I gotta know. Yeah, she's from Australia. That's so crazy. What a bad representation of the country.
Yeah, wow, dude.
Australia has to have a better breakdance than that. I'm sorry. That's a cool place. And, like, they have a bunch of cool cities, like Melbourne and
Casey
Perth.
really went up there, then, because Casey's got a whole Australian crowd behind her.
Maybe they could put Casey in the Olympics next time.
Yeah.
Put the king in there. God, that'd be so funny. But overall, like I said in the beginning, when the UFC goes down under, it's such a fun time because those fighters, they truly fight with a different type of intensity. Kind of like when they go to Mexico or like countries like that have like just a fighting spirit about them, which is cool. I enjoyed this card, honestly. I really did. I thought it was a good, I guess, I'm trying to think of like the word, but whatever. We'll just say it was great because that's really what it was. And the next pay-per-view, I can't wait for that too because that's going to be at the Sphere in Las Vegas. You know, Dana White has been hyping this up for a long time. He said it's going to be a one-off too, so this is the only time we're ever going to see that. That's going to be a fun one in September, obviously competing with the Canelo card as we've talked about. But, you know, next week, that's going to be an interesting one too. It's at the Apex, which people are probably thinking, is it from Wheel of Fortune? Price is Right. Boom, boom, boom. But trust me, this is not one of those Apex cards to scoff at because this main event is a good one and the undercard is good too. Like I mentioned before, the main event, Jared Cannonier versus Kyle Bohayo. God, I'm never going to get that. The fact that I know how to say that one and I just can't do it. Like you get what I mean. That's going to be an interesting fight though. You know, we mentioned how the middleweight gatekeepers always seem to get these wins. This is going to be another one where a young up-and-coming contender in Bohayo fights Jared Cannonier to try and get in there in that upper echelon of middleweights. But then the undercard, Angela Hill versus Tabitha Ricci, that's a fun one. Neil Magny versus Michael Morales. And then Edmund Shabazian versus Gerald Mearshart, who we were saying before. Somehow, neither of them have ever been in our spelling bee videos, and that's kind of crazy. But yeah, two of the hardest names to spell in the UFC in that fight, but also just a fun striker versus grappler matchup. Should be a fun card there at the Apex. We're getting closer and closer to UFC Vegas 100. I really hope it happens before this supposed Apex shutdown, because we were gonna do a pod on that, but I only heard it from one source, and like the big rule with journalism is you got to have multiple sources. So like I didn't want to do a whole show on that just off of like a rumor, but it's a rumor that the Apex is going to be shutting down for construction until the summer, basically after like November. And I think that UFC Vegas 100 actually might be around our birthday, which is both because for those who don't know, our birthdays are a day apart, which is kind of wild. We were born a day apart. This kid's older than me. Can you believe that? Kid. Dude, why?
I'm the one.
Yeah, you gotta start calling me kid.
Yeah.
No, I will take this trophy and actually, like, I would hit you over the head if you called me kid. But yeah, this is gonna be a fun card at the Apex, and I think it's gonna be an interesting pod next week because I think we're gonna have a lot to talk about, honestly, either way. Because Jared Cannonier is like one of those dark horse contenders at middleweight. And obviously, we just had a huge conversation about the fighting nerds and what they're doing right now in the sport. And if Bohayo can get this win, I think that he's in a really good position at middleweight. So, yeah, I can't wait to cover it. This has been a fun one covering the events down under, and we'll see y'all next week.
Feels just like a superstar. Doing all these drugs, I don't think I'm gonna see tomorrow. Living fast, brand new dash up in a foreign car. It's the type of shit that you be doing when you going